So in this segment, we're going to be discussing the EU Commission scuppers Macron's plans for a Europe-wide migrant return deal with Britain. And this is nonsense. This is from the Telegraph. It's a nonsense headline because it's not. The EU haven't scuppered any of Macron's plans. It's just nonsense. The headline from this Telegraph article is jokes because it sounds like the EU are undermining France, whereas what happened is that France basically hid behind the EU so they could refuse to take back asylum seekers from Great Britain. But the framing here is just so dumb. The Commission has rejected French President Macron's call for an EU-wide agreement for migrants crossing the Channel illegally, asylum seekers, to be sent back to Europe. But if they're going to Great Britain, I don't think the Telegraph knows geography because Great Britain is in Europe. Brussels has no plans to negotiate a migrant return deal for Sunak, despite improved relations after the Windsor Framework Agreement. Saying, quote, the Commission is not envisioning an asylum returns agreement with the UK now, end quote, an official told the Telegraph. France could set up its own return scheme if it wanted to, but it's not really in France's interest to set up a scheme because it means they would have to deal with more asylum claims, which is, they're already dealing with way more than the UK. And their backlog is pretty bad. The Prime Minister and Mr Macron agreed a deal to tackle the small boats crisis, which will cost the UK £470 million over the next 3 years at a summit in France. The French president insisted any returns would have to be made at an EU level, rather than between Paris and London, as the two leaders tried to rebuild relationships badly strained by Brexit. And, there it is, they kind of debunked themselves here. Macron would rather have a deal between the UK and the EU rather than the UK and France. Probably because it will take the strain of, taking back people specifically just to France. But I think the main reason he said that is because he knows the EU Commission would not grant such a deal, meaning he can avoid the issue in negotiations with the UK and still come off not looking like the bad guy. The UK left the EU's Dublin regulation, which gives the right for countries to send back illegal migrants, asylum seekers, to the first safe EU country they landed in. So, for example, under the Dublin regulation, we could have sent back asylum seekers to France. That's one of the reasons why the numbers from people from, asylum seekers from France crossing the English Channel have risen so much since Brexit. Brussels is responsible for negotiating EU-wide agreements on behalf of its member states and is the only body able to strike a replacement return deal. EU officials have now ruled out a deal for the short to medium term. In terms of creating like a Dublin-style regulation copy, yes, it would go through the Commission, which works on behalf of the EU members, which means the EU member states don't want such an agreement. It's very clear. Sunak has not given up hope on an EU returns agreement in the long term and hopes Paris can use its influence to sway von der Leyen, the Commission president. Well, clearly this is not an issue Macron cares about that much, and given the protests Macron is facing, in raising the retirement age, I'd argue he's got more important things to deal with because the French are rioting again. And I don't think France wants an agreement regardless. But the swift rebuff from Brussels risks fueling suspicions. Mr Macron, an enthusiastic Europhile, only called for a deal to avoid directly refusing to take the asylum seekers back directly. There was also no great push from any other European capitals to demand that work begins on preparing for migration deals with Britain. So it took a while for the author to get to the point, but congratulations. It's not in the EU's interest to do this. Let's be honest now. And so they're not going to do it. Brussels dismissed Britain's request for a new migration deal during the 2020 free trade negotiations. Instead, it offered to have, quote, regular dialogue, end quote, over the issue. Yeah, sure, we can talk about it. Nothing's going to happen, but we can continue negotiating. They said, quote, the UK ellipses expressed instead interest in concluding with the EU agreements on the readmission of illegally entering or residing persons and the transfer of unaccompanied minor asylum seekers. However, neither of those two topics were covered by the EU mandate. The UK may wish to approach some member states bilaterally on these matters, end quote. So there you have it. The EU have said the UK can negotiate with individual states, but individual states like France are saying it needs to go through the EU Commission, which shows you that they have no intention of creating any such deal for the future. And based on the 2020 talks with the TCA, they don't want to set anything up for a third country. Like life as a third country, you can have your sovereignty, you can taste it, but when it comes to other countries, they too have sovereignty that they've just found after Brexit apparently, and they are willing to use it. Because here you can see the EU Commission saying, well, the EU member states don't want it. If you can do a deal with an individual state, then it's fine. France, with their sovereignty, have said no, no deal, and this is, it shows you how kind of nonsense some of the Brexiteer arguments were about, the Commission having all the power and not the member states, because we can see here the member states do have, the vast majority of the power. But I don't know what more to say about this one. Apart from, really, it goes to show you how kind of dumb the Brexiteers were, because they wanted an end to the Channel crossings. It wasn't a major issue back in 2016, but by doing Brexit, they've just given more control away to France, because there's no way for us to prove where these asylum seekers really came from. When you think about it, there's no way to really prove they came from France. The EU does keep track of people. They have databases and things, but we don't have access to those databases, so you can't really prove much. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.